All right. Welcome to the final full talk of today. Lovely to see you all here. I have with me Matthieu Caneill. Practiced really hard on that. And he's going to tell us something about a project that he built at his employer, Picnic, about a dbt linter that they've open sourced. So I am really, really excited to hear more about this. Give him a big round of applause.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Last presentation of the day. Bear with me. Thank you for still being alive and focused. I will introduce myself in a minute. Before this, I would like to share with you some observation that I saw out there in the wild on LinkedIn. Someone commenting that they are writing 5 times more YAML than Python. So I know this is PyData, can be offensive to some of us. And by the way, this was the first reply, which I disagree with to some extent, but the shared feeling of writing YAML rather than Python somewhat hits home. I wanted to double-check this assumption. So I did run a count of lines of code across data repository we have at work. And indeed, over the last few years, we did write lots of YAML. That's more than 130,000 lines of YAML code. And one thing I also observed is we introduced dbt sometime in 2023. A strong correlation with writing YAML. Now, I will explain why it's a problem and how we somewhat managed or fixed it after I introduce myself. So my name is Matthieu Caneill. I'm a tech lead in a platform team in the analytics realm. You might have figured it out at this point. I'm French. I live in Amsterdam. I just crossed the river this morning. Still carry this funny accent. This is my employer, Picnic. If you live in the Netherlands or France or Germany, you might have seen the little cars. We are an online supermarket. We do the whole supply chain of groceries. And this generates lots of data across the whole chain, and that's where my work lies. Last but not least, this is my little coding assistant. This presentation would not have been possible without him. Cheers, Pixel. All right, let's get to it. Welcome to my presentation about dbt-score, a linter for dbt model metadata. And in the spirit of free and open source software, I would like to share with you already a few takeaways of this presentation. The first one is that you should use declarative model properties. You should also enforce consistency through linting and allow customizations through simple user experience. Now, I understand if it doesn't mean much to you yet, so I will demonstrate those takeaways with this outline. First, introducing dbt for those of you who might not be familiar with the framework, and then the need for linting, and the solution for linting we built at Picnic, which we call dbt-score, and how it integrates in the rest of the data stack. This topic is relevant to this conference because I'm going to talk about data, and then I'm going to talk about Python, so I thought PyData was a nice fit. Let's get to it. What is dbt? So that's a data warehouse, and I'm going to talk a lot about data warehousing concepts. Big giant database holding all the data of an organization or company. And in order to build a data warehouse, we usually write SQL. Let's build a pizza shop. Here I'm creating an SQL table for holding all the pizza's data. I create the table, give some columns, do some data transformations coming from a raw products table, and I end up with a new pizza table suitable for analytics, for data analysts to use and, well, dive into pizza data. Later, we create a second table, one about pizzerias. Again, we create a table, do some transformation, boom, data is there. And so on and so on. Maybe we want some sales data in order to do further analytics on how we sell pizzas. Once you have all the data, you can build applications on top of it. Maybe some notebooks from machine learning experiments, dashboards for your C-level executives who like to see data being plotted, a catalog, look for the right data in the right place, pipelines, organize everything, move things from left to right, data apps, why not? And that's a beautiful data platform. When you reach that point, you start to have problems such as, oh, the schema changed. Now we have a new table, a new column in the existing table. Sure, fire some SQL to create it. And then, 19th of September, there was some missing data. Nobody knows where it is, so we insert it manually. And, manual fix for production data. Sure, fire some SQL, fix it. Which becomes chaotic and not very manageable. On top of this, other problems can appear. I don't know, orchestration is pretty complex, data arriving out of order, change data capture, lost data, nobody knows what happened to it, manual input, quality checks, or the lack of quality checks, private data that you should certainly be careful, GDPR, customer data. If you tackle all of this, that's a lot. When you have a lot, you have performance issues. So building data platforms is complex, and that's where dbt comes into place. So dbt is a framework. It means data build tool, and it certainly does not pretend to solve all the problems I showed before, but it helps making them more manageable, more organized in a way. And how dbt works, so let's look again at our SQL table for pizzas. dbt has the observation that this SQL query is really divided into two different parts that have nothing to do with each other. The first part is the metadata, also called the DDL for data definition language. It's where we describe the structure of a given table. We have a primary key, we have some cheese column, whatever. The second part is the logic, the transformation logic. It's the select part of SQL, also called the DML for data manipulation language. And also, very distinct, even though it's a single SQL query. So what dbt tells us to do is to split these two into SQL on one side, the pure data transformation, the pure business logic, and a YAML file on the other side. And the YAML file represents metadata. The metadata that is here is the exact same metadata that we had in SQL before, except it's easy to parse, it's machine readable, it's always the same format, contrary to the many SQL dialects, and so on and so on. What dbt does, it uses the metadata in the YAML to dynamically generate on demand the entire SQL you need to build your data transformations. Now, this would be a bit limited if that was the only feature. We don't really gain from only separating things that way. So what dbt encourages is to store more metadata in the YAML, things that are not directly related to creating SQL tables. So in this pizza shop example, I added some properties which can be pretty useful, such as description for the table and description for the different columns, some configuration options for dbt to figure things out. I say, who has access to this data? Pizza CEO wanted access. Well, they have access. We have an owner for our data, pretty important. There's probably a dashboard connected to it. Columns got some data tests. My primary key table must be unique and non-null, the primary key. So it's all declaratively described in there. And that's one of dbt's key features, which are data models as first-class citizens. By first-class citizens, I mean data models, so dbt SQL tables, or entities that you can easily manipulate and program on top of. So dbt allows us to program models by separating their metadata and their transformation logic. And then it does all the heavy lifting of building and refreshing data automatically for you by generating SQL, running all the tests that we have defined. My primary key table is non-null. It can generate SQL to assert that. given we have all the metadata in the YAML files, it's pretty easy to build a catalog on top of it, either a website or a wiki, a Confluence page, whatever. And that's what dbt does, and dbt also allows us to build anything else we want. We have the metadata laid out somewhere, easy to fire up a Python or SQL program making use of this metadata to implement business needs. If you need to implement GDPR deletion of old data, well, you have all the metadata you need to know which tables depend on which ones and where the data must be deleted, which is one example among many. So by now, hopefully you understand a bit what dbt does, separation of transformation and metadata in order to build more things. I will explain the need for linting those dbt files. So those are two dbt models. It's only the YAML part, only the metadata, not the SQL, which I will not look at today. On the left, it's the one we saw before, our pizza stable. On the right, it's our pizzeria stable. They both look pretty good, and for the untrained eye, there's no issue to be seen. Pretty sure I could get this approved in code review if I were to build it. However, if we stop and look at some details, there are some issues on the right side. For example, the description of the pizzerias is not capitalized. Little typo, it's a little detail, but we must have attention to details. We better have everything consistent between different tables. Also, we do allow any user to select data from this table. Usually, we don't want to expose data too much, especially if it's private. So something we could flag, there's a data leak. Look at the owner, it's null. That's invalid. Data must have an owner. Also, it has no dashboard defined. What's data without a dashboard? Our ID column does not declare the fact it's a primary key. It should be. And there's no test in my two columns there. So sure, maybe there's some data, but who knows how good the data is without any tests. So all those little things are pretty hard to spot by hand, especially at this level, especially when you have 130,000 lines of YAML code that starts to be inconsistent, of course. It's pretty common for large organizations to have hundreds or thousands or dozens of thousands of data models. That's a lot to lint. It's an easy 100,000 potential issues you can have in your metadata properties. So in summary, we have many models with many properties written by many people from different backgrounds, maybe data scientists, data engineers, data analysts, with different approaches to data quality and data security. That's no good. So dbt offers first-class citizen models, metadata management in the form of YAML, my favorite programming language. However, at scale, we do need to enforce consistency. We do need metadata quality checks, and we do need data security. And those are the problems we have, and we solve them with the solution I'm going to introduce now, called dbt-score, and how it fits in the data stack. So this is dbt-score. It's an open source package we built at Picnic over the last year and open sourced somewhere in May, a few months ago. It's MIT licensed, anyone can use it. And that's finally the part where I talk about Python as promised. It's written entirely in Python, just like dbt. One immediate consequence of this is that everywhere you run Python or everywhere you run dbt, you can run dbt-score. So maybe you run dbt on your operating system or Python virtual environment, or Docker image in CI, in the cloud, anywhere really. Well, dbt-score can be installed as a companion library. So you install it like this and you use it like this. It's a CLI. It's pretty self-explanatory. You type dbt-score, you ask for help, and you do get the help you need. From then on, you can easily explore the features. It can hardly break anything in your dbt project, so it's experimentation friendly. Now let's go back to our PIDS analytics project, and let's lint the data models about pizzas and pizzerias I introduced earlier. The main command of dbt-score is lint. So dbt-score lint, that's what you would obtain. So as you can see, our pizzas model was pretty good. It had all the descriptions and the owner and the dashboard, and everything was neatly arranged together. It gets a nice score, 10 out of 10. That's pretty good. And first place golden medal. You can see the list of assertions that have been run on this model. They are all green, all OK. However, our second model, I did point out some things that have been forgotten. Well, dbt-score did catch some of them. Hence the third place medal and the lower score and the warnings you get. You also get a project score, which is the average of all the models in a given project. So as you can see, we did not have a description for the ID column. It has been flagged there. We did not have an owner. Null is not an owner. It has been flagged there. So dbt-score can be configured somewhat extensively. Every dbt project out there works differently. Companies have different requirements for their dbt models. So we can do all kinds of interesting stuff. We can define some different rule namespaces, which I will introduce later on, that allows you to write your own dbt-score assertions. You can disable rules. Not all rules apply to every project, of course. You can configure a minimum threshold for a project to be valid or invalid, which is useful for CI if you're below 7.5 or whatever. Then you want to fail your CI builds in order to prevent bad models to make their way to production. You can change the badges. That's pretty fun. So if you don't like the medals and you prefer using carrots and sticks to encourage people to write good models, just use the right emojis there. Finally, for every rule, you can overwrite its severity. Severity will impact the score by having a weighted average. Some rules take parameters to be further customized, so that's where you would configure them. This is all TOML. It goes in pyproject.toml, so it should integrate well into any Python or dbt project. What else do we have? Yes, back to our issues of pizzerias. So we did have a couple warnings when running the regular dbt-score, but there are more things we would like to check. For example, the capitalization of descriptions is a rule I made myself for my own pizza shop. Maybe not everyone wants this, so this rule does not exist in dbt-score. Same for some of the other warnings we get here. So one of the main features of dbt-score is to allow you to write your own rules or your own assertions. And this is done in a very easy way. That's how the API looks like, and an example of a rule you can write yourself. So it's a Python decorator. You declare, hey, this function represents a new rule. You name it however you want the rule to be named. It's a function that receives a model as an argument, does some logic of checking the model, and it can return a rule violation whenever something is found that should raise a warning. In this example, I did implement the capitalization rule. I receive a model. Hey, if it has a description and the description is not a title, let's flag this. So that's what, 3-4 lines of code, and you have your own assertion for your own business requirements. Oh yeah, and in order for this rule to be recognized by dbt-score, you just have to dump it in a Python file in the root of your dbt project. In the configuration, you can say, hey, look for this Python namespace that you can name however you want, and it will be automatically imported, automatically found. You don't have to do anything. It's Python dynamic magic. That's a slightly more advanced rule. No need to go into all the details, but you can change the severity of a given rule. You can make it low. It's not very important. You will not lose too many points in your score if you don't pass this rule. Or you can make it critical. You will fail the build if this rule is not respected. And the point here is you can implement any logic within the function. dbt-score will blindly execute it. So it can be as simple or as complex as your requirements are. In this example, I'm checking that every column has defined tests. I loop over every column. Does it have tests or not? And at the end, hey, those columns don't have tests. Raise a low severity violation. So I implemented all the rules of all the warnings I could spot earlier. It took me a few minutes. Every rule, 2-3 lines of code. And when I run dbt-score focused on the pizzeria's bad model of before, I now get all of these warnings and a bad score and a me emoji. This is a JSON output. It's exactly the same information as you get for the human output I showed before, but it's machine readable, which makes it very convenient to use in CI or any other integration you want to have with dbt-score. I don't know, Slack alerts, whatever you need. Another neat feature, if you're familiar with the dbt data catalog, it's a little website that is built on top of all your metadata, which allows users to look for the right column, the right table, the right documentation of their data. dbt-score can enhance the catalog to add its own metadata to it, to add its own score and its own badge. So you can easily shame bad models in your organization by adding their score there for everyone to see, which is an interesting gamification strategy to improve your data quality. Finally, I did not go over every feature of dbt-score, but we do have a more extensive documentation website. So everything is documented there and should be a great starting point. This brings me to the end of the presentation. I did share a few links there. That's why you can find the project, documentation, and Git repository. They all link to each other, so only write one of those down. I do want to thank dbt-score authors. Some of them are my colleagues at Picnic. Some of them are external contributors, to which I'm very thankful. It's a young project. We are looking forward to growing and having more external contributions. It's open source. It's not a Picnic internal package. Finally, Picnic is sponsoring this work, and we are hiring various data positions. Take a look if you're interested. Thank you very much. I hope we have time for questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Matthieu. We certainly have time for questions. Yeah, I see a question over here.
Great stuff. We'll happily use it.
Nice.
Can I ignore a particular rule for a given model? Like you would do if you would do Python lint, you would say, well, just comment ignore this this rule for this particular statement.
Can you, yes. dbt-score has a configuration mechanism where you can skip rule under some conditions, such as I want this rule to be skipped for models in the temp schema, because temp schema is for experimentation, and we don't care about linting there.
But not like on the fly in your YAML, I guess.
No, that would be a neat feature, though. I guess you can implement this. You can skip rule if YAML has the property temporary, and then you add this property in your YAML. So it's pretty flexible in that sense. You can build your own mechanism.
Hi. So we also use dbt and have some custom PyTests where we have to parse, for instance, sources to see if they have a certain tag. And then we look if any downstream models have also a certain tag or have a certain property assigned to them. And then it fails. And I saw you have those custom tests you can write, right? But I think they always need to have only exactly one model as input. Or is it also possible to write some kind of dependencies? So saying if this has tag A, then other schemas or models have to have tag B or something.
Yeah, that's a great question. So within a given custom rule, it's Python code that can execute anything. So you could, in this Python code, look at other models that exist to make some assertions, which is a bit of a dirty solution. There's been a lot of demand for getting access to the full manifest from within a custom rule on top of the given model being linted. So that's a feature we are looking to implement. It's not lots of work. If you're interested to contribute, you can, but that's certainly a direction we would like to take.
Thank you very much.
Hi, really good. Probably you're gonna use it. I was just curious what to think. So first, there's also the dbt project evaluator, which already does it after your models are compiled. So I was just wondering, you were thinking maybe also, because I think your solution may be neater, because we don't need to connect to the data warehouse. So if it wouldn't be a good idea to perhaps just copy some of those rules that the dbt project evaluator is already asking you, and just use them also as rules here. That was the first question. The second question is, all of this I can run it without having to connect to anything, right? So like it's just basically just parsing through my YAML files and telling me.
Yes, so you actually put your finger on the main difference between dbt project evaluator and dbt-score. dbt project evaluator runs in your data warehouse by firing SQL queries to look for how those properties are materialized or not, which can be expensive, which can be harder to do in CI, is not self-contained. And I believe it's harder to write custom rules, or they need to be SQL versus saying it's a Python approach. So both projects are interesting. They are somewhat complementary, but have a different philosophy.
Other questions?
What's next development for the dbt-score? Will you introduce like fixing on the YAML statement there?
So we don't have a roadmap. It's an open source project, and we are seeing what the community wants out of it, what people want to build and contribute. It's pretty new, so we don't have fixed ideas of where this is going. So why not? Fixing might be a bit tricky to do in some situations. We rely on dbt to do the heavy lifting of parsing a dbt project. Yeah. So making this connection from what we get from the dbt and where it came from, YAML files, SQL files, is not that easy to implement. But of course, that would be a great feature to have.
Okay. Nice talk, by the way.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? No? Then thank you again, Matthieu, and give him one more round of applause. All right. I think at 5, lightning sessions are starting below in the big hall, the Rembrandts.